أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد الأمين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين آمين يا رب العالمين. Dear respected viewers, be you from the Shia community, be you from any other community, I welcome you back to this show, back to the basics. I am your host, Yahya Seymour, and of course we are continuing with one of the letters that was sent in by what seems to be a very sincere youth from our own community, the Shia community, cast into a world of doubt by the very thing which has motivated me to do the show, namely globalization and the concept of a world being a small global village in which we will come across people with other views. We will engage and encounter people of other views, and of course this will sometimes cause us to have some introspective reflection, which is a very, very healthy thing, might I add, when channeled into the right direction and when all opportunities are taken to be a submitter to the truth. Of course, I've been engaging with the brother's letters. He had several questions for me. This is one of our brothers from London. And inshallah ta'ala, I hope to sincerely answer them to the very best of my ability. Of course, there are several things that must be addressed before I get back to that letter. Those things pertain to what the schedule of the show is. Inshallah ta'ala, after we will deal with this letter, we'll be returning straight back to the worldview of Christianity and the concept of God within Christianity. I do apologize to the viewers who might have felt that this break was a rather abrupt one. Certainly, it might seem that way, but inshallah ta'ala, dear viewers, we have several more halaqat, we have several more episodes coming along, and it's not like those who are primarily watching them cannot wait a few days till we return back to the subject. But please do forgive me for taking a slight detour and detraction from our original topic. Of course, our brother who has requested to remain unnamed for very good reasons, and those good reasons are the fact that he's afraid of what his family might think of him. But of course, we ought to remember that if we are parents out there, for those of us who are parents, for those of us who are siblings, we should not be controlling, nor should we be those who make our children be afraid to come forward with their questions. Rather, we should be like a friend to them, like a teacher to them, and give them the right responses and engage with the problems that they face. For indeed, if we believe that this religion is true, then the answers are there. And if the answers are there, then there's nothing to hide. And if there's nothing to hide, then there's nothing to get angry about. Of course, this should be our approach. And inshallah ta'ala, we continue on that note with some of the things that the brother asked me. Of course, I had reached about 2/3 down his questions, but I wish to return back to a couple of them because I felt that due to the time constraints of last night's episode, I did not necessarily do those questions great justice at the time. He asked, why is there no focus upon Tawheed in Shia Islam? Now, I've stated that I will clarify what that means, and it could mean one of two statements. And if it means if he means by the first category, then I would agree with him that the emphasis is pretty much zero in certain places and in the majority of places. And if he means by a second category, I would state that he's wrong. Brother, if you mean by why is there no focus upon Tawheed in Shia Islam, that amongst our scholarly circles, that in the texts of Ali Muhammad, that in our books there has been no focus upon Tawheed, this is absolutely wrong. And you will find there are many great books about Tawheed out there. Inshallah ta'ala, I may even suggest a few at the end because I believe that is one of your questions. And inshallah ta'ala, you can go through those books and you can see what Ali Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them, have to offer. You can see the world of Tawheed opened up by great minds like Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. You can see the Tawheed taught to us by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And you can understand furthermore the way that the Quran opens up when you understand the Imam's interpretation of these ayat. You can see that when it comes to the way that the Imams have negated certain traits attributed to Tawheed by others, you will see how indeed the Ahlul Bayt are truly divinely appointed and divinely inspired. So if that is your question, if your question is why there's no emphasis in the Shia community, we have to put our hands down and be very honest. We unfortunately have to submit that there has been a lack of emphasis upon Tawheed. There's been a lack of emphasis upon many different concepts which the Imams stressed an importance upon. Is this phenomenon unique to the Shia community? Is it something identifiable in every Shia community? No. I've been to many Shia communities globally where, due to having a good resident alim, there will be a decent emphasis on the Tawheed of Ali Muhammad. Where, due to having supportive parents, there will be a decent emphasis on the Tawheed of Ali Muhammad. Why? Because such parents would encourage their children to go to an effective madrasa, to an effective school to teach them their doctrines. And such a school would highlight the key issues in aqa'id. They would offer the key issues, and they would offer them in such a way where the evidence is there, the evidence is given, both textually and rationally. And due to this heavy emphasis, their children would be raised with the Shia worldview. Now, of course, why is there a lacking emphasis everywhere else? Unfortunately, brother, this is the nature of the dunya. People become focused on things of attachment, and things become more of a cultural relic for some. And we have to be very honest. We have to be very, very, very honest. When you look at the ways that Ali Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them, address Allah Azza wa Jal, when you look at this direct relationship that Ali Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them, have with Allah, it is quite frankly shocking the way that we see that our community places very little emphasis on the doctrine of Tawheed. It is as if our books of Tawheed have been buried in a graveyard, unfortunately. Now, of course, there is a renewed interest. There certainly is a renewed interest. And particularly, we find that those youth who have been given the freedom to think are returning back to the doctrines of Tawheed, returning back to the school of Ali Muhammad on the issues of Tawheed, and writing great commentaries on our existing books on Tawheed. This is something which, inshallah ta'ala, we hope will one day be translated into English, and when it is, then the brothers can benefit. Although, inshallah ta'ala, brother, perhaps you already know Arabic, and I shall indeed recommend some excellent works for you. Second question that I wanted to readdress was, given that Sunnis and Shias differ on sources, what would you say is the best proof for imamate, independently speaking? My answer is not going to differ too heavily from my answer last night, but I felt that because I wished to get through all the questions last night, I did not give the answer sufficient time, nor did I clarify what I meant to the best of my ability. Because we differ on the sources, brother, I think it's necessary for us to understand that sometimes it is not. You see, what you just asked me, my brother, is evidence of a fact that there is a key misunderstanding. Given that Sunnis and Shias differ on sources, why did you believe in those sources in the first place, brother? Did you believe in those sources because you came to believe that the Quran is true independently of Islam being true? Or did you look into Islam first and come to believe in the Quran because of Islam? Of course, those in the generation of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, they would have seen the Quran as the ultimate miracle, but if they didn't believe that the Prophet Muhammad was a prophet, they wouldn't have believed in that Quran. Likewise, I question the very foundations and epistemology utilized by people when making a claim about sources. You see, I don't reject the Trinity because it's not in the New Testament. Because if I wanted to go down that route, then the Gospel of John could easily justify a binitarian reading of Jesus being a second God. But I reject the whole thing because the religion, for me, is not one that makes sense. And of course I say for me because I want to highlight that I'm not saying this to be patronizing or disrespectful to any viewer that happens to be Christian. I know that when sometimes we hear our religion is put on the defensive, it makes us get offended. But dear viewers, no matter what your religion is, come to understand that people do not say these things in order to offend. When I state that I disbelieve in Christianity, when I state that Christianity is not reasonable for me, this is not because I know Christianity to be true and want to willingly go against it. This is something which is difficult for any Christian to justify. He has to prove to me that I believe Christianity to be true. He has to prove to me that I have had sufficient proof given to me in order to believe in the doctrine of the Trinity. He has to prove to me that the Bible is worthy of believing in. Likewise, when I engage with anyone else, they should not assume, an atheist should not assume that I know there is no God and I want there to be a God. No. Even when I made the claim that deep down atheists know that there is a God, I tried my best to give as objective evidence as possible for this claim, and I made a very simple claim, which is that it's not a livable worldview. This is something which has been demonstrated by many of its own key proponents. So we have to understand that people are sincerely rejecting things based upon evidence and what seems to make rational sense to them. So given that we differ on sources, I've already highlighted that this is not a source discussion, but rather it would boil down to a discussion on worldview again. What would you say is the best proof for imamate, independently speaking? The best proof for imamate is the worldview that includes imamate as its key doctrine. That is my answer to that question, and inshallah ta'ala, back to the basics, we'll eventually come to that point. Do you ever doubt? So I think I gave a relatively elaborated answer upon this yesterday, but I would like to, inshallah ta'ala, just elaborate slightly. Of course I do, brother. Of course I have gone through phases of doubt. And I'd like to clarify about what we mean by doubt. You see, many people will say things like, I've never doubted in my life, I've never once had doubt. And of course we consider it a very noteworthy thing that someone would have a level of conviction, as long as that level of conviction is based upon evidence and rational thought. You see, I have doubted in the past. I have doubted on the basis of textual issues. And I have doubted on the basis of what I could call, inshallah ta'ala, brother, you seem like a very rational person. So when we come to the issue of a problem of evil, brother, we're going to take a very short break. This is going to take too long for me to explain, and the break will allow me to return to it and give you the right answer. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers. We were, of course, discussing the question of the brother, which was, do you ever doubt? I've explained, if by doubt you mean, have you ever been open to the fact that your beliefs might not be accurate? Certainly I have. I have on certain issues in particular. And I would say that that was due to adopting certain beliefs without having decent evidence for them at the time. And I would say it was due to necessarily, I think there were several key factors behind this particular point, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, given that in your letter you wanted to not highlight your name or any other details like that, because you were afraid of what others around you might say. Of course, there is this fear about what others around us might say. But the thing is, we have to be sincere to evidence. Sincere to evidence to the point that no matter who will judge you, you don't care, because at the end of the day, the one that will judge you is ultimately Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, we need to be very, very sincere with all points. And what I mean by that sincerity is, we need to not just take for granted any particular beliefs. Now, one reason I would often doubt is because of the nature of the shubahat that were brought up. You see, they would bring up the fact that classical scholars had said one thing, one classical scholar would say another thing, and I might start thinking to myself, oh wow, if that classical scholar could disagree with everyone else on this point, then how do I know that this point is right? And I would understand that what was happening was people were expecting a ridiculous standard and canon of evidence for a certain belief which they would apply to none of their own beliefs. There was not what we would call epistemic consistency. And what I mean by epistemic consistency is that same level and standard we would expect one to apply when judging any other belief. So for example, someone might say to you, give me evidence for imamah. And you would find that such a person didn't even have good enough evidence to believe in nubuwwah in the first place. And yet they would try and hold you, blackmail and ransom you on the basis that you both were meant to be Muslim and therefore should believe in nubuwwah. So what you would find is that it was a nature of this skeptic's game. And if you return to last night's episode, I tried to explain it as well, where the atheist will do the same thing, the Christian will do the same thing. No, we need to be consistent, and consistency is the ultimate standard. Now, that is what I found when it came to the issue of doubt. Now, another thing that will allow you to doubt more is, brother, I know that you said you were at university. I know that you said Shias don't seem to be practicing out there. You're probably feeling very lonely. You've probably gone through something difficult in your life. You're probably finding stress due to exams. You have to understand that in such circumstances, this is where the concept of a community will play a large role. And if your community is made up of people who are not upon the same school of thought as you, it's only natural that you'll start considering those things, especially when you find the behavior of people in your own community to be quite vile. And what I would say to the people in our community who do have vile behavior is fear Allah. Fear Allah. Because you may be the reason for someone being further pushed away from guidance due to your behavior. But at the end of the day, Allah is ultimately the guide for everyone. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to guide us all and to keep us upon righteous guidance after guiding us, inshallah ta'ala. What advice do you give the average truth seeker, I like that term, in today's era? The advice I would give the average truth seeker in today's era is, number one, know the value of your intellect. Know the value of what it is to be a human being who has been endowed with a rational faculty. That rational faculty is what distinguishes us, primarily, according to the naturalist worldview, from every other animal that we see around us. And it is that rational faculty that has allowed human beings to build up civilizations, along with, of course, the tawfiq given from Allah Azza wa Jal. But that rational faculty will ultimately be your savior when it comes to deciding which worldview best explains away reality. And of course, if Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed Himself, which of course we as Muslims believe He has, then Allah Azza wa Jal has given us a decent means with this intellect, with a raw tool, in order to judge between truth and falsehood. You see, Allah Azza wa Jal did not give us libraries. Allah Azza wa Jal did not endow us with books of usul al-fiqh. Allah Azza wa Jal did not endow us with books of ilm al-rijal. Allah Azza wa Jal endowed us with an intellect. And so we have to consider, what proof would Allah Azza wa Jal give us? That proof which is consistent with the intellect. Anything which is inconsistent with the intellect and is irrational as opposed to non-rational, then that thing is by default necessarily rejected, because, of course, truth is not found in inconsistency. How do you cope keeping up to date with online debates and freshly discussed topics? I see Facebook alone and both sides are disgusting. Okay, that's a good one. The honest answer to that is, brother, I don't. I don't, and I recommend also that you do not. And the reason for this is, you tend to find that, as the ulama of akhlaq have stated, akhlaq of course being decent conduct and ethics, they have stated that debates bring people away from the remembrance of Allah. I would just give you an experiment, brother. Try blocking yourself from social media of all forms and irrelevant conversations with people for 2 weeks and give yourself a to-do list of things that are productive that you have always wanted to do. See how much you are able to achieve in those 2 weeks. Close the social media and don't look back, because it is only a route to time wasting, blackening the heart, and of course giving us a very raw and crude image of what the world is really like, because we would see that there are numerous keyboard warriors, and at times we may even feel prone to wanting to become a keyboard warrior. And inshallah ta'ala, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to keep us sincere, to keep us inshallah ta'ala as people open to the truth, to keep us as rational, and to keep us as people of honor and dignity. This is something that we would pray is given to us by Allah Azza wa Jal, and this can only be achieved by staying away and abstaining from a world in which these kind of conversations go viral, from a world in which people are cheering you on, not because they know that the truth is with you, but rather because they're a bunch of groupies who have never investigated the truth themselves and want to cheer you on because you're their runner guy. It's as if it's a sports team, my brother. And that's why I will always find a place for brothers like you in my heart, because you are sincere to the fact that we should search for the truth. You are sincere to the fact that there are apparent issues in the community, and you're willing to grab the bull by the horns on that particular issue. You're not like those who might remain loyal to the truth all their lives, but have never really investigated the truth, but are really just there to be yes men, people to tap others on the back and say he's amazing because he says the things that they want to root for, people who essentially go around making judgments on others and yet have never looked into the evidence themselves, nor have they ever put in the effort that many of the people they condemn have put the effort into looking for things. And of course, at the end of the day, brother, my last advice to you is this. We need to admit that our intellects are one thing, but the grace of God, the tawfiq given to us by Allah Azza wa Jal, our Creator, is another. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give us that tawfiq to be people who search for the truth, to give us that tawfiq to be people who submit to the truth. And of course, Allah Azza wa Jal is our ultimate guide. Dear viewers, thank you once more, and we'll be joining you again tomorrow. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.